Good afternoon. This video I'm going to deal again with Robert Breaker and his nonsense. This is the guy, he thinks he can just claim, deny anything he says, and then just get away with it. So he had commented on Jason, says, Jason sent me some comments from other pious so-called Bible believers who claim I got all this wrong in my live stream, and I'm really a quote-unquote racist who corrects the King James Bible and that the Bible is really against slavery completely. We acknowledge that the Bible accepted slavery, okay? No one ever said that the Bible is really against slavery completely. They said, the Bible says that it's accepted as an evil that had to be tolerated. But it wasn't for slavery. It isn't pro-slavery. And that's to say, why it's not in the millennium? No slaves in the millennium. And that's to say otherwise is ignorance and stupidity. I comment on Jason's channel the following. Okay, thanks. I'm not a racist, that's for sure. Okay, he has the thing at the bottom of his thing on interracial marriage that says God is really against interracial marriage for Christians, and he says, please pray for me that I get a good, and I'm paraphrasing, a white wife, a wife of my own race. Okay. Now, if you make an issue of your own race, what does that make it? See, they want to now, it's like Brian Dang wants to narrowly define what racism means. I'm not for destroying the other race, so that means I'm not a racist. If you make an issue of your own race, after being a Christian, and that's what you think about, your hypersensitivity, Brian Dangler's the Germans, and of course it's white Germans, and so it's white, and of course with Robert Breaker. He makes an issue about the Civil War. He wants to lie about it. He wants to bring up the issue of the slaves were happy. The slaves were getting off 5 months a year. The South was really Christian, so we know the South treated those slaves well. Rewriting history, people. Rewriting history. Now, where does that come from? That comes from a hypersensitivity about what he assumes is an attack on his race. Okay? Now he goes in here, the issue about the correcting the King James Bible. He wanted to say servant really meant slave because the word doulos. No, the word servant meant servant. Based on different contexts, you could probably imply that because they have master and servant, things like that. But there's a reason why the King James Bible never used the word slave in the New Testament. And he goes the word doulos, and he goes the Old Testament. That's the Hebrew word. Okay, doulos isn't the issue is that the Old Testament is so he's using doulos as a basis for changing a servant to mean slave, and yet in the Old Testament, it's found in the Old Testament, not found in the New Testament, the word slave. Okay, they've taken my live stream video about slavery in the Bible and have tried to twist what I said. Now lying. As they claim I said something I didn't. I never said the King James Bible was an error or translated incorrectly. That was an implication. That the word servant should really be slave. How sad someone would lie and say I did. This guy's so phony. And all I did was show that the words servant and slave come from the same Greek word in the New Testament, which is doulos. Yeah, but it's never translated slave in the New Testament in the King James Bible. In modern versions it is. But I never said the King James Version translated it wrong in any passages. No, what you mentioned was that the word could be translated as slavery. Even though the King James Bible made sure it didn't translate as slavery. Rather, I showed that the King James Version translated as slave twice, not doulos. Not doulos. In the Old Testament, that's Hebrew, not doulos. And as servant all the other times in the New Testament. This is the guy who plays word games. From what I'm gathering, these people attacking me claim that servant and slave are not synonyms, even though they are. No, they're not. No, they're not. Not all servants are slave. A slave can be a servant, but a servant doesn't mean he's a slave. So they're not synonymous. A servant has free will. That's why it's used that. Now, in connotation of a slave, you wouldn't have free will, but a servant would. You can leave a servant. You have servants. People leave. They're not slaves. This guy can't figure the difference between a servant and a slave. and they think I have two completely different meanings. I don't see that. Oh, you don't see a difference between a servant. If someone has a butler or maid, a full-time butler and a maid, you don't see a difference between a servant and a slave. You got a problem. I don't see that. The Webster's Dictionary gives a definition of slave as servant and vice versa. I would reject that. But I know that you can have a servant and say the servants can leave when they want in modern days. I mean, they're not slaves. A slave couldn't leave when he wanted. That's the difference. Even indentured servant is called indentured servant, not indentured slave. Indentured servant meant he is limited. There was a time limit. A slave is permanent. Just take it by the way out of slavery. So the argument is silly. They want to say that a servant is only a willing person who serves others, while a slave is someone who's forced to obey another's will. Yeah, that's what a slave is. But both terms are used. Well, a slave can consider himself as a part of a family, but the reality is he could also be regarded as a slave and as an inferior person and as someone basically disposable. What do you think they were using slave labor? Slave labor in the Third Reich, in Nazi Germany. What's that called? Slave. They were slaves, and they were starved and beaten to death. Oh no, they loved it. You know, let me show you something here. This is from the Vice President of the Confederacy. This is the rewriting history. These guys. This guy is so phony. This is the Cornerstone Speech. This is made by the Vice President, Confederate Vice President Alexander H. Stephens. Okay, March 21st, 1861. The Cornerstone Speech is so called because Stephens used the word cornerstone to describe the great truth, quote unquote, of white supremacy and black subordination upon which secession and confederation were based. Its foundations are laid. Its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery, subordination to the superior race, is the natural and normal condition. So our new government, from the Confederacy, is the first in the history of the world based on this great physical, philosophical, and moral truth. Using biblical imagery, see, they want you to bring the Bible into this, people. That's why Robert Breaker went to Genesis 9. There's no accident he went to Ham. Stephens argued that the divine laws co-signed African Americans to slavery as the substratum of our society. Our Confederacy is founded upon principles of strict conformity with these laws. The Bible. They say Confederacy is based on the Bible. The stone which was rejected by the first builders, the Declaration of Independence, is become the chief of our corner, using a biblical phrase there, the real cornerstone of our new edifice. So you can read that. The Neo-Confederate movement. Now look, I don't expect people who live in foreign countries like Jason and Book of Relief and Jay and these people understand what the real battle is with these Neo-Confederate guys. And that's what this guy, Robert Breaker, is. He's no less a racist than Brian Dengler is. And he can put all the disclaimers up. And same thing with Ruckman. Ruckman's always talking about he loved black people. And then he write about, blacks should be, the curse of Ham. They should be, the Confederacy was right and the North was wrong and all this stuff. He's got a whole article in there talking about the North and the South are all Christian people. And they interpret the King James right, and the North was all incorrect. They all wrong. The North had Baptists and Methodists and Presbyterians who interpreted the Bible correctly, just like they had Southern believers. Now, the fact that many abolitionists, far left people, they had Unitarians and people like that, and they were involved in all weird stuff. No question about that. But there were a lot of Christian abolitionists. And also the idea that the escaping slaves, under the Old Testament law, you couldn't return an escaped slave. The Israelis, the Jews, were not allowed to return an escaped slave because the Lord said you were bond servants, right? Bond servants in Egypt. Now, when someone escapes from slavery, you have to protect them. The South wasn't obeying that. The South was going up with the Fugitive Slave Act and taking them from the North. That's where riots broke out in the North, because they had you talking about state rights, states' rights, where they said this was property, so they would go up and get those people as property. Even Washington, George Washington, he had some slaves escape from him, and he was going after them. But the fact is that that's how they viewed it. They viewed them property as very valuable property. But the Neo-Confederacy is a movement. It's a fringe movement that wants to say slavery was not, the Civil War was never about slavery, even though you got and they try to deny that speech, the Cornerstone Speech. It was never about slavery, it was about tariffs, and they were eventually going to free slaves, and then it was going to the individual at the end, they used, some black people would fight for the Southern Confederacy and stuff like that. And so, they forget to mention the fact that they were slaughtering Union soldiers who were black. If they wouldn't take black prisoners, they'd kill them. They forget all that. Now, they keep bringing this stuff up. The war's over. But they bring it up because they feel this hypersensitivity about, we're being unjustly, called this or that, unfairly, tarred with this, that we're racist and that this, Well, who's making the Jim Crow laws? Who made that up? You think it just came out of that happened in the Christian South? Separate water fountains and stuff like that. Weird stuff like that. Come on. Because people go to look. The Bob Jones University didn't allow interracial dating until the federal government forced them, based on the people using the VA benefits to go there. And that's where Ruckman came from. Well, no, Christian interracial dating. You go to Robert Baker's video and see, he makes a whole case against interracial marriage. Then he wants to give a whole disclaimer. Everybody can do what they want to do, but please pray for me to get a good white, not a Christian wife, a good white wife. A good Christian white wife, I say that one. That's racial. He's making issues race. When a guy starts thinking of himself as white, as a Christian, there's a problem there, people. I don't care what his disclaimers are. I don't care. I love the black people. I love the Chinese people. I love the Japanese. I love these people. I love the people. But he calls himself, I'm a white Christian. My white heritage. That's what Brian Denton was, his German heritage. His wife dressed up in a German outfit. It's bizarre. Okay? It's bizarre. Because Christians don't think that way. There's something he hasn't rejected, the cultural old man. The old man is part of that flesh. He hasn't rejected it. He's clinging to it and then trying to claim it, as being Christian. And you see that also Ruckman's writings and stuff like that. And they can give all the disclaimers they want, but there's something in the back of their mind that they're holding to. So I don't expect that Jason to understand what's going on with this Neo-Confederate thing. And we're lying about that. Brings up the word doulos. The word slave is not doulos in the Hebrew. Okay? That's a different Hebrew word. I haven't even looked it up. It's a different Hebrew word. So why is he bringing up doulos for? Why is he bringing up the issue of slavery? Why is he doing that? There's a reason why the word slavery wasn't put in the U.S. Constitution, but it's put in the Confederate Constitution. Negro slavery is put in there. They won't allow whites to be slave people. They put Negro slavery in there. They didn't expect the whites to be enslaved anymore. It became a racial issue. We understand slavery wasn't a racial issue until about the 1840s. Based on the need for cotton. Cotton got value raised up because the cotton gin, they think, the machines made cotton, stuff like that. And therefore slaves became much more expensive, more valuable. And the North was making profits off it. The North was hypocritical. We think we're shipping the slaves, the Northerners. So we understand all that. And no one's trying to pick on the South, but these guys come up there and they want to make a bunch of baloney up. The King James Bible, a servant in context doesn't always mean a slave. And that's what he's trying to prove. We have servants today. The word is still used, servant. Butlers and maids who are considered servants, full-time servants. Okay, in England, stuff like that. And then rich Americans have. who owned slaves. And of course, in a benevolent home, a slave could be considered a family member. No question about that. And no question of benevolent owners, rulers, masters. No question about that. But he's bringing it up and trying to say this is a benevolent system. And it's not. It's open to all kinds of abuses. Man wasn't made to own other men. Okay? Okay, Robert Breaker? Man was not created to own other men. That started under an evil man. When men started capturing men. Nero. So he's up there in the sanctimonious. People lying about me. This is typical the Confederate garbage. People lying about me, misinterpreting. Oh, and this, that, and the other thing. With doulos is irrelevant. What do you bring up a Greek word for? You want to argue about the English? Argue about the English. What do you bring up a Greek word for? You want to play the Greek game? And then the only place it mentions in Hebrew, in the book of Hebrew, the Old Testament. Now, this guy is a big phony. And he's always making these equivocations and trying to get out of it. Faith works. We mean this. We don't mean that. And I say people are misinterpreting me, And I love everybody. He's with a big smile. Get out of here. And then he comes back there, look at his comments. That's why I left that other video up, basically. Look at his comments. Look at the real Robert Breaker. I'll say the old man. The old man Robert Breaker. I think it's really, he's got an attitude problem. That's why I go after him. These guys don't want to be checked. They don't want to be talked to. I'm being misunderstood. I'm being misrepresented. No one's representing anything. Now, I expect foreigners to understand this issue with the Confederacy and what's going on here. I don't understand, because you don't understand the intensity of feelings Americans have about the Civil War. Still do. He brings up the issue about how relevant the Civil War still is. He brings that up. He has a whole page dealing with his great-great-grandfather that he wants to talk about all the time. Just like Brian Denny was. They all grow beards that look like their great-great-grandfathers. How bizarre. This guy. He has a page on the Confederacy. I don't have a page on the Union, the Northern thing, Union. I don't have a page on it. He brings up the idea of, Sherman and stuff. Sherman was pro-Southern. That's why he hated the blacks being freed. He was a pro-Southerner. That's why the Congress made sure he didn't make a separate peace with the Southern. It was going to be too easy on him. See, the Neo-Confederates are, he goes to the first black slave. The first black slave was owned by a black. No, he wasn't. 1640 was the first black put into slavery. It says in the Wikipedia. He doesn't tell you that. He gives you a picture of a book. That was the first civil case where a black man owned another black man. Patrick, St. Patrick, from Ireland, we call him St. Patrick. He was captured by Irish pirates. Made a slave. We know it was never racial. And he escaped and came back, had a burden for the Irish and came back and evangelized them. Likewise, 100 years later, Colombo, Patrick was a Scotsman. Colombo was an Irishman captured by Scottish pirates, and he escaped and he went back and evangelized Scotland. So slavery's always existed. I mean, since man started thinking they can own men. But that's not the condition of man, okay? That's the condition of a fallen world. That's not going to exist in the millennium. And so this idea that's, it's okay, it's just that, thing. So, in context, we understand, there's Paul's talking about in the Roman times, slavery's all over the place, which was a great burden to the Roman Empire because they was afraid of slavery revolts. They're always afraid. They had the Spartacus issue. I mean, that was always a great fear. When the slaves outnumber the masters, in Sparta, for instance, the same thing. They owned slaves. Big thing on slavery. It's all over the place. So I mean, the point is that it becomes as much of a degeneration for the owners as the people being owned. You begin to think you're somebody, you're superior. Look at me, I own how many slaves I own. It's very hard not to be generated that way. Now, this guy wants to bring this up. We're going to talk about it. I didn't bring it up. He did. And now he's whining and crying about it. But I know about these neo-Confederates. They show up on a lot of conservative websites on areas we talk, and they're always bringing the garbage in. They want to change history. We're going to give you real facts. He gave you 2 lies. He gave you 2 lies all off the bat about Sherman, Grant. Grant didn't have any slaves in the White House. Grant was given a slave by his father-in-law, worth about $1,500 at the time. He freed him, even though Grant was having a hard time. Grant one time was out of the military and was on, trying to work as a civilian, and he was in debt, but he freed his slave. So I don't get where to get this idea that slavery in the White House. Slaves were freed in 1865, the 13th Amendment. Grant was advocating the 15th Amendment to allow blacks to vote, which the South was resisting, because the blacks were Republicans. Democrats. They were Republicans, and that only changed in 1964 when the Democrats were very, when the LBJ sold them the idea that it was the Democrats who passed the Civil Rights Act, which it wasn't. It was the Republicans who passed it. The southern states voted against it at that time. They were Democrats, voted by Democrats. But that's history again. They don't, people don't recognize that. So blacks have since then been all Democrats thinking the Republicans are racist. They're the guys who've been supporting them. And then, of course, that switched with the 68 and with Nixon and stuff like that, and the idea of trying to reach whites. And then blacks look at that as well. See, they're not trying to reach us anymore. They're trying to go after the white vote, as trying to set one against the other. But that's more modern history. The point is, look, he brings this stuff up. There's a reason for it. He brings the issue of white heritage. He brings up Brian Dengler, and he's being falsely accused. And he's always, people lying about him. No one's lying about anything. And there's spectrums of racism, people. Believe me. This idea they want to go this very narrow thing. I don't want to destroy the blacks. Good, great. And I want them to say, well, that's great. But he is hypersensitive about his race. James O'Brien is. White this, white that. I mean, Christians forget about it. This stuff, who cares? His culture, my heritage. He makes an issue. Read the article on interracial marriage. He makes an issue about his heritage. Why can't I talk about this? Because it's idiotic. That's why. There's nothing forbidding interracial marriage. There's always friends that are interracially married. And he holds that as being, see how tolerant I am, because I have friends that are interracial marriage. Well, that's very big. But you tell people to pray that you get a wife of your own race, which you make an issue of race. So obviously you think these people aren't legitimately married, according to what you wrote in that article, because you think this is all going to bring the Antichrist in. That's the same thing. Welcome to it. So I'm going to stop here and put this up. I'm going to take this guy. He wants to always have it both ways. He makes a big disclaimer up on the big Confederate thing. This is not against any race. And he thinks by making disclaimers, he can constantly get away what he wants to say, and then walk around and say, I didn't mean that. I didn't mean that. The Confederacy stood for advancement of slavery, people. If the Confederacy had won the war, they were planning on expanding slavery into Cuba, into Mexico, into the West, everywhere they could. They believed expansion of slavery was their right. That's what the war was about. They were refusing to allow. When Lincoln came in and said, "I can't touch slavery in the South," which made a lot of abolitionists mad. He said, "I can't touch slavery in the South. It's constitutional. I'm just not going to allow it to grow." That was the war was over. Don't let them lie to you. Don't let them deceive you over this. Oh, Lincoln just was a tariff. This is about tariffs, and this is what Lincoln was going to go in there. Well, when John Calhoun said South Carolina was going to pay tariffs, Andrew Jackson said he was going to be a war. He said he hanged the first man he caught on that issue, which meant Calhoun, which one time was his vice president. These guys will all want to tell you, oh, you don't know real history. You don't know the real history. And then they just store it and they put little things in there. He puts a book up there. The first black slave owned was owned by another black slave. That's it. It's a lie. Go to Weedy Peak and you see 1640 was the first slave owned. That happened. This guy owned that in 1652. It was the first civil case where that happened. But that's how the Neo-Confederates operate. I've been dealing with these guys. And that's what he is. He's a Neo-Confederate. He's got a whole page up to defending slavery. It was about tariffs. It was about slavery. It was about slavery. Slavery was benevolent. They didn't have both. It was really benevolent. You know, slaves got off 5 months a year. You know, can only pick cock the 7 months a year. Hey, where can I get a job like that? Hey, Robert, you're off 12 months a year. What are you talking about? What job do you do? By making videos. Besides making videos. So yeah, you got a problem with that. Yeah, I got a lot of problem. But the worst is that this guy always wants to have it both ways. And what he does is little, you know, act, you know, this little thing. I just love everybody, and you know, I just want to see souls saved. I don't want people. And he'll put up with something that's antagonizing people, like Brian Daniel does, and then wonder where the flack comes from. So I'm being misrepresented. No, you're not. Not yet at all. Confederacy was an evil that had to be destroyed. The Confederacy. It had to be destroyed. And thank God it was. And thank God this country was kept united. Unfortunately, it took the bloodiest war in our history to do it. Sadly, it had to be done. And all the bitterness afterward. And all the abuses. The South would never accept the fact that the black was equal to them. And they denied them their civil rights. The first gun control laws were passed in the South. Or the Neo-Confederates were, you know, very libertarian, you know, and oh yeah, we want the freedoms. Yeah, first gun control laws were passed in the South to keep guns away from the blacks. That's what blacks don't understand, who always advocated gun control. It was to keep guns away from them. Gun control laws. You know, I mean, they don't understand that. It says, you know, the way the whites kept the blacks enslaved in the South, servitude was to keep them disarmed. That's how the Ku Klux Klan could, you know, roughshod over them. Let me stop and put this up. He brought this up, people. Remember that. Remember that. It wasn't me who brought it up. And he wants to hold up his hands now and say, oh, I'm being misrepresented. Oh. He wanted to defend slavery as a positive good, people. That was the purpose of that video. It was a positive good, and the South was really misrepresented. The South was treating the slaves all well. You know, all the beatings and that just really didn't happen. And the South, they just got off 5 months a year, and they got to go hunt and fish and wander around, do whatever they want. You know, there were no fugitive slave laws. There were no things, you know, they weren't getting hung. They weren't getting, you know, oh, that was just a few, you know, pagan, you know, guys. Most of the South treated their slaves like, and he's given the idea that, you know, the breasting, you know, the mother. Where do you think the laws came in forbidding black and whites to marry from? Who do you think were producing? That's what happened up in Lincoln. They were accusing Lincoln of being a black lover, you know. Use a harsher word than that. But who do you think were producing this doing? Mixed races. The white slave owners. Going to black women. What do you think that was? Where do you think that was coming from? And then they passed laws against it. They're the ones doing it. Against the black women's. And they were dividing families. They had the right to divide families. Get sold up the river. That's where the expression came from. What do you think that didn't happen? Jefferson sold off his slave, had to sell off his slave after when he died. He had so much debt. He always tried to make sure that the families were divided. Husbands were divided from their wives. Children never saw their parents again. That happened, people. That's what's the reality of slavery. You were owned by somebody, and you could be bought and sold. So don't just Robert Breaker guy get up there and talk about, oh, how he's being I'm not a racist. And then he goes to Genesis 9. What for? That's to take out one more race. Why go Genesis 9 for? If you have a secret thing, insinuation that, well, yeah, these guys are gonna, yeah. Canaan was wiped out. Canaan gone. That's who was really. It wasn't a curse of Ham. It's called the curse of Ham. Canaan. So really, he was the grandson, and so son they can mean grandson. So it could have been him involved. You know, Ham doesn't get any blessing because he basically told the two brothers, but no curse of Ham on it. You should sort of mumble jumble on that. You know, oh, excuse, you know, servants. Well, Egypt was a pretty powerful country. You know, that's called Ham. So stop here. And remember who started this, people. He gets up there and is holier than thou garbage. He did. He has those articles up on his thing. I asked him to move that thing on the interracial marriage. He never did. He would get up on the live feeds with Max Bauer and stuff like that. I tolerate everybody, and I'm just loving everybody. And then you read the article. He thinks you Christian interracial marriage are unbiblical. And then he's going to try to use like servant is a synonym for slave. No, it's not. Not in every context. Not in every context. Clearly, servants are not slaves. Now, you can use a euphemism for a slave and call him a servant. But in reality, you have servants who are not slaves. They can come and go. You don't own them. They have free will. And he was trying to say a slave would be a better definition of the word or different view of the word because he wanted to consider himself a slave of Jesus Christ, which is what the modern version try to put in there. Lordship salvation is. But the issue is we're not slaves to Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ doesn't want slaves. He wants people who freely respond to him in a love relationship like a husband and wife. And he even made a comparison to a family of a husband-wife relationship. That's how whooped this guy is. That's a total reciprocal, freely giving, loving relationship. On a slave relationship, you're owned, people. That's what it means being a slave. You're owned by somebody. And you have no free will. You have no free will. Because it's demanded. You got services demanded of you. You have to do such and such. I own you. You have to do such and such. Now you go through the thing and say, yeah, you can go up, a slave can be raised up the way he feels like a son and he's loved and he's beloved. That can happen. But that's not the nature of slavery. Slavery is about owning somebody. Man was not made to be owned. And the South was on the wrong side of history. The South was essentially, look at their rule, the Confederate Constitution. They wrote Negro slavery in there. It was a fascist government. I don't care what they want with the word Christian. It was essentially a pre-fascist type of government. They thought they could slave everybody. Mexicans, Indians, anybody they wanted. They could, that's what hey, we're going to enslave everybody. They did. They absolutely did. You can read about it. And NeoConfederacy go, no, we're Christian, and we were right, and they bring up this guy and that guy. General Lee, Robert E. Lee felt the South had no right to secede. The Constitution didn't give them right to secede. You want to read the issue of secession? This is not right to secede. No one in the Confederate Constitution they didn't write in the right to secede. No country can survive the right to secede because you have people just come. That's why the Articles of Confederation moved to the Constitution. The Articles of Confederation was too weak. It's not a country. It falls apart. Anybody just going to come and go when they want. You have to have a country. You have to be united by the people. But he started this. Remember this. He's the one bringing these issues. Why is he bringing up this stuff? Why is he having articles on interracial marriage? Why does he have articles defending the Confederacy? And then he wants to not be racist. Why is he lying about this thing about Grant and Sherman? Doesn't give you the whole details. Sherman loved the South. He spent a long time in the South. I think he was married to a Southern woman. So as for that matter, so was Grant. And so that matter, Lincoln was too. But we'll stop here. I'll put it up. This guy is unbelievable. And he wants to con you. Only thing he does when Brian Denver him is he does it with a big smile and he tries to give you the old golly gee. I just want to, after giving you a bunch of lies and distortions and he won't be corrected on his faith works garbage and other issues, and he brings up doulos. Why bring up the Greek word? You want to just start with the English and this is the English word servant and we can be fine. Doulos. And the Old Testament is Hebrew, buddy. It's not Greek. Unless you go to the Septuagint, which I know you're not, because you don't believe the Septuagint existed. But this guy's got arrogance, a haughtiness. That's why that's why he left those articles how he ended. Oh, Eddie, who's this guy? Who's this guy? You know, he thinks it's something. He's the one started the issues, but articles. He's the one writing this stuff. And then he wants to set up the criteria. Well, I'm not a racist, so I don't want everyone blacks. That's what I don't want everyone blacks destroyed. I want them saved and blah blah. Well, so what? You make an issue of your own race, you're a racist. You want to call it a mild racist? I don't care. There's a spectrum. They want to be, if you don't want to advocate the destruction of the entire race, like Brian Dengler says, you're not really racist. You just want to make an issue of your heritage, your white heritage, your German heritage. Like as a Christian, that means anything. That means nothing as a Christian. So stop being put this up. Amen. Thank you.